Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we have a 2020 Grand Design Momentum, and we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the Kodiak Disc Brakes for 7,000 pound axles. From the factory, your Momentum is going to come with your traditional style drum brakes, and when you get into a camper of this size or a trailer of this size, the drum brakes really are not, they're not going to work very well, because when drum brakes get very hot, they don't like to work properly. That's where our disc brakes come in. They're going to stay cooler, they're going to provide better braking, and ultimately give you more comfort when you're traveling down the road. As I said, this is going to be a kit designed to fit 7,000 pound axles. It will fit 16-inch wheels and larger. It's going to have an 8 on 6.5 bolt pattern. The bolt diameter itself will be 9/16. Chances are your old bolt diameter is going to be a 1/2 inch, so if that is the case, you will need to pick up some new lug nuts. The disc brakes themselves are going to have a dacrament coating, which have a salt spray test done to them to help resist rust and corrosion for the years to come. Where I think that comes into play is that nobody likes to see a big rusty drum brake through their wheels on a big, nice, fancy rig like this. So the disc brakes are going to look good for a really long time when you're rolling down the road or when you're at the campsite. The brake pads themselves will have a ceramic construction applying, so whenever you apply the brakes, it's going to give you really, really good grip on both sides of that brake rotor. And to help with the longevity of these brakes, the piston that will apply the brakes is going to have a stainless steel construction. These are going to come in a set of 2, so for however many axles you have, you will want to pick up a set for each. We're going to go ahead and pull this rig inside, take the wheels and tires off, and show you a little bit closer look and go over a few more details. This is what our brakes are going to look like. You can see that it looks very similar to that of an automotive disc brake. This is how you're really going to get that strength, is because you're going to be pinching, the brakes are going to be pinching both sides of our discs here, and that is going to be much cooler and much cleaner than using drum brakes. You can also see that these are going to be oil-filled hubs rather than your traditional bearings that you have to pack with grease. The oil is just designed to provide a really good lubrication for those the bearings on the inside, so you don't have to worry about packing the grease. The one thing about this is that you are going to have to check the fluid level to make sure that you don't have any leaks. The back seal, you want to make sure that's not leaking, and you want to make sure that your cap is not leaking. The hard part about that is a lot of the wheels and tires that come with your RVs, they're not going to have a removable cap. So you're going to have to take your wheel and tire off to check your oil level. You may notice a little spot like this when you install your caps. That little residual oil there on the bottom is just from whenever you install this cap, you're going to want to put a little bit of oil on the rubber seal. That's just the residual from that seal coming out the bottom. My favorite thing about disc brakes is that, again, it's going to be just like your car. So in order to change your brake pads out, you take a bolt off the top and the bottom of our caliper here, pull the caliper off, put your 2 new brake pads in, and put it back on. It also allows you to visually inspect the face and the back of the disc brake itself to see the condition of the brakes. If you ran your brakes down too low and you've got gouging, you can take these in, get them milled down if you want to go that route, or you can get some new ones to replace it. The hardest part about checking drum brakes is that, or I guess I should say the more frustrating part about checking drum brakes is that you have to take the drum off just so you can see the inside of the drum and so that you can see the brake pads. And when you do that, if you've ever done it before, you have to take the bearings out, and you really aren't supposed to reuse the grease seal on the back, so you're going to have to put a new grease seal in, repack your bearings, and put it all back on. And that's all just to check to make sure that your brakes don't need to be replaced. This way, you can see it without even taking the wheel and tire off of the coach. You can just look in here, see that your discs look just fine. You can see you've got plenty of pad left. Maybe crawl up under and behind your vehicle and look on the back side too, check the back brake pad, and you can see all of that without having to do anything. There are a few other components that you're going to need in order to get this kit properly installed. We went with the HydroPro brake actuator. We went with the 1600 PSI actuator. It has a very, very fast reaction time, and that has got to be the biggest compliment that these brakes will get compared to electric brakes. these are going to have a much faster reaction time. The other thing is with that being 1600 PSI, it is going to be a much stronger grip on these disc brakes. So what we've seen a lot of people do is they'll come in here, they'll drive around our parking lot for a little bit, we'll ride with them, and their brake controller is usually at like a 9 or a 10, which is at the top end of their brake controller, and they're still not having enough braking pressure. Well, when we hook back up to the camper, they have it on that 9 or 10 still, and we're dragging all 4 tires because the pressure is that high on those brakes. So usually they have to lower it, and they are very, very happy. The other thing that we had to use when hooking up this kit is we use the HydraStar brake line kit, which will run from the actuator on the front back to your brakes. To begin our installation, we're going to be working one side at a time. So we're going to take both of our wheels and tires off our driver's side. Then we'll take a flathead screwdriver. We're gonna have to pop these caps off because that's where our axle nut is at. Just try to get in behind that. We are not saving these caps because our new disc brakes come with them. We'll do the same thing to the remaining 3 hubs. We need to clean off some of this grease so you can see our retaining ring back there. Take your screwdriver, pop that ring off, and you should be able to grab a hold of this nut, twist it off. When you pull out your hub, your outer bearing will pop right out. We'll take our hub, set it down. Inside here you can see all this brake dust. Our magnet is covered in it. We've got brake dust everywhere. There's a little pile inside of the drum itself. So you can see how hard these brakes were working. Our disc brakes should work much better. You want to take a rag and clean all this old grease off of the spindle. We're going to go one step further in a little bit. Before we put our new assembly on, we're going to hit it with some brake cleaner just to make sure that it's all clean because we are going to be switching to oil filled. So we don't want any of this grease on there. Take a 15mm socket and remove the 5 nuts that are holding our brakes on. Now make sure you've got a pair of snips handy because we're going to need to cut our wires here so that our brakes will come off. There we go. You'll want to repeat that process for your remaining brake sets. The next step in our process is going to be to put our brakes in place. We are going to pause the brake installation for now because we have to convert this over to the Roadmaster Comfort Ride, which is a whole new set of leaf springs. They are taking us on a pretty long trip up to the northeast of the United States. So we're going to get that all set up for them while we have full access to all this hardware. Because as soon as we start putting the brakes on and stuff, we just don't want them getting dirty or damaged. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side, and then we'll come back, and once we get our Comfort Ride on, we'll come back and show you the rest of this install. Now with everything removed from our spindle, there's one thing that you want to check before continuing on in the process. You can take your brake flange that comes in your kit, throw it on here, try to thread on one of the nuts. If you do not have the head of this stud flush with the end of the nut or sticking out past it a little bit, with these, this is a very common size because the old brake drum, or the drum brakes, is like sheet metal. so it doesn't take a whole lot of stud for that nut to fit properly on. But with our new brake flange, it's like 1/4 of an inch thick, so chances are you're going to have to knock these out. We do have replacement studs on our website if you want to pick some up. So our studs were only coming through our nut about halfway through the nut, so we need to put some longer ones on. You just take a hammer and just lightly tap them out. They're just seated inside with these little teeth. Now the stud kit that we're using is going to be a set of bolts, and it'll come with the nuts and the washers, the lock washers. So we're going to slide it through. We always like to put a little bit of blue Loctite on here just to take the temptation of vibration away. We'll just put each of those studs through our holes. Now you'll want to tighten and torque all of these nuts to the specifications that comes with the kit. To get your hubs on, you want to make sure to test fit the bearings first so that you know if you're having trouble getting it on and off the spindle that it's not the bearings that are the issue. And this is how they should be aligned. The smaller diameter of the outer should be in, and the smaller diameter of the inner should be out. Now we know that those fit, we can get them placed inside of our hub. Now you'll take your hub, set it face down with the studs facing the ground, drop your bearing in, make sure that it's setting correctly. Then we're going to take a little bit of our oil that comes in our kit. We're going to go around this outside edge. This is just going to help it to slide in a little bit easier. And we'll take a small block of wood. If you have a bearing press, that really works best, but it's kind of hard to find a bearing press or a seal press that's this large. So we'll take our block of wood. This is going to ensure that we're hitting it evenly. And you want to hit it. Make sure that it stays aligned until you get it all the way in. Once you hear the piece of wood start to bottom out on this rim here, you can just feel around the edge, make sure that it is even. To help with the installation on our spindle, we'll take a little bit more of that bearing oil, just rub it on the inside here. You put a little bit on the bearing too, it just helps things along. And we'll take our hub, slide it over our spindle carefully, and we want to try to push it over top of our spindle here at the very end. You can see it's only going to go on a little bit. We've got a fix for that. You'll take your outer bearing, slide it in, make sure that it's set properly in there, just like that. Then take your washer that originally came off of these spindles, slide it on, then thread on your nut. Then take an 1.5 inch socket. If you don't have one of these, you can use an adjustable wrench on the end. It's just very hard to get into the inside of this hub. And we'll just slowly start pressing this in. And you'll see that your seal will start to compress onto our spindle. Okay. You want to tighten it down all the way and then back it off just a little bit to where it pops loose. And then what I like to do is just bump it back a little bit. Then you'll take your retainer clip. Get that back in place. You may have to adjust this nut one way or another in order to get this back on. It looks like we need to turn it just a little bit. Then we're going to take a little bit more of that oil, put it on to our seal here, then we can thread this into place. Come back and tighten this down with our channel locks here. You just want to compress that seal. You don't want to go too crazy on this. Take a screwdriver, pop your plug out, and we'll take our bearing lube and start filling the inside of this cavity. This is going to take some time, so essentially what you want is you want the oil to be about where it's at right now, where I've got it, but this is going to go away with time. So the oil is going to slowly creep back in there. You want to come back and spin it, and really what's best is if you can leave it for a day and keep refilling it. About every 10-15 minutes you can come back and look at the level of the oil, give it another spin, and then let it sit, let all the oil drain to the bottom. And then after a day, you'll know whether or not you've got the right amount of oil in there. Once you get the hub portion of our brakes done, we're going to take our brake caliper. You want to slide it up into place. You want to make sure that you have this top bolt at least slid to the edge here, because once you get it up into place, you're not going to be able to put that bolt up there. This takes some finesse in order to get these in there. Just take your time and you should be able to pop them in. Now we'll take a 13mm wrench and tighten these two down. To get our brake actuator connected to our brake calipers, you're going to need a line set. We use the Hydrostar line set because we've had really good luck with it in the past. We know that it's long enough to be able to reach on this long trailer, and that you have all the fittings included in order to get everything connected. So let's go ahead and show you that. To run your line set, you're going to attach the longer length directly to the bottom of this fitting that we have sticking through our hole in our pan here. And then you want to run along. It's not a bad idea to use a tubing bender because you can kink this stuff, and once you kink it, you got to get a whole new line set. If you're using your hands, make it very, very sure that you are making the curves gentle, and then we just followed along. Used the included straps that come with our kit. We just took out the screws that they had in there, took it out, put our loom clamp on, and then ran it back up in there. And we just ran it all along the side, following those same steps. You want to put any slight bends over it if you have to go over top of any lines, and then go back all the way to our first set of brakes, where we'll put a loop in it and then attach it to our block that has 4 fitting inserts on it. From here, the long line set that's coming from the front is going to go into one end. Then you'll have another line set going out back to the rear axle on the passenger side. You'll have another one that goes across to the driver's side. And then you'll have your brake line that is a flexible brake line that you just put in a small loop down to the brake caliper itself. Now, because we have the Roadmaster Comfort Ride system, we had a really nice way to run our hose going from the block there back to our rear axle. We just ran it inside of this block. If you have the same situation, or if you don't, it's a good idea to throw some wire loom or some heavy amount of tape on it wherever it could potentially rub. So we don't want it to rub on any of the hardware on the inside of this block, so that's why we put that on there. But the way that the rear brake calipers are going to be connected is you run it back. I just put a small loop here, and then you're going to use the union fittings to connect both of the male ends, and then your male end here will just come out through your flexible hose and into the brake caliper. When you run the hydraulic line over to the driver's side of the vehicle, you'll have to tap into the fitting that comes with your kit, it only has 3 because we don't have the main line coming back, but you'll have the flexible line coming out the one side. We draped it around this side of our comfort ride. Again, if you don't have the comfort ride here, you can do a straight shot down to your brake caliper. And then we took our other line. This one, because it was at a different angle, we did not go on the inside of this block. We went on the outside, but we still wanted to keep it safe and out of the way. Whenever you're tying this line up to the underside of the belly, just cut 2 slits in it, and you can put a zip tie over and kind of stitch it to it. And this stuff is very, very strong, so you can tie it off to it. And then for the rear one, we did the exact same thing. Just put a small loop in it, and then we have our fitting here, and then attached to a flexible line into our brake caliper. In order to bleed your brake lines, you want to have a reservoir or something like this. We just use an old bottle with a hose, and you want to put it on the end here. Otherwise, when you're bleeding these, you're going to have brake fluid going everywhere. You want to put a wrench on the small portion on the top. This is a 5/16 wrench. And you want to have a team of people up at the front of your vehicle applying the brakes on your truck that you're pulling your camper with, and you can bleed the brakes that way. So we'll go ahead and open this valve up and turn on our actuator. Once you see no air bubbles, you want to shut that valve off and turn the brake actuator off. Now once you've checked all your brake calipers, one time I'd go around and check them all again just to be sure that any air bubbles didn't get to a different hose while you were trying to bleed one. After you've done that, you go ahead and put your cap back on your brake actuator and you're all good to go. Once you've bled your brakes, you want to put the correct amount of fluid in. Once you put your cap on, you can then pressurize the system so you have none of your brake valves open, and you'll want to just turn your actuator on and let it run for a little bit and check all these fittings to make sure you don't have any brake fluid bleeding out of them. Now that we've got our braking system all taken care of, we've come back the next day. Since we did this portion of it yesterday, we come back and we're going to check this level, make sure that our level is all good and that it's still holding there. If you want to add a little bit more in the morning on the next day, you can do that, but let it sit for a few more hours to make sure that the fluid doesn't go away. Spin it a few times. I spun this one about 10 times, and the fluid always comes back to this level. Once you do that, you can take your plug and put it back into place. When you install this kit, or any brake kit for that matter, you are going to have a break-in process. The break-in process that we found works really, really good for disc brakes is you have to start by going about 50 miles an hour, and you want to do a hard brake down to 20 miles an hour. And then pick your speed back up to 50, brake down to 20 hard. And this is called the bedding process. And what it's doing is it's going to burn off any oils, and it's going to bed the brake pad to the rotor because they're not machined to be perfectly flat against each other, but that process will get you to where they are matched up perfectly. And you want to do that process about 10 to 15 times. So 50 to 20 hard, about 10 to 15 times. Well guys, hopefully this video helped you decide whether or not the Kodiak Disc Brakes for 7,000 pound axles is right for you and your trailer.